Guys, welcome to another episode of the podcast. We are joined by a guest. We're hardly ever joined by guests, but my mission this month, this year, is to basically get as many guests on the HOC as possible. So we have a female guest. We have Jess. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm always fantastic. So Jess, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand the floor to you and say, what's your background? Who the fuck are you? Who do you kind of coach? Who do you deal with? And then we'll get into the podcast that way. So the floor is yours.
Yeah. I'm an online coach. I have my PT certification that I did in Australia back in 2018 with JPS. So everything was evidence-based from the beginning. Then I was an intern for Revive Stronger, which your audience probably knows. Then I worked for Revive Stronger for 3 years as a full-time coach. And last year, almost a year ago, I decided to part ways to build my own business because I wanted a change in direction. So now I still coach people for bodybuilding, but I'm taking a direction into coaching people more for disordered eating patterns and body image issues on top of nutrition, and still training because it's the foundation of my coaching. And this is what I enjoy doing. And it's still good for overall health.
Mhm.
But I have competed before. I've seen the kind of damage it did to my overall health, whether it's mental or physical. So I wanted to take care of people who were in my situation with everything I've been through as well. So raising some awareness and being able to talk about more body image and like the mental aspect of things.
Mhm. Yeah, I think if you've never been for a bodybuilding prep, it's almost like you kind of hear stories, but you never really know what kind of goes on to a prep until you've actually been into the prep. Because you can like it's all well and good like hearing stories, but until you've actually been where you are, it's kind of like yeah, you'll never really get an understanding of who you help. Because yeah, ultimately you have to go through that phase kind of thing. Um, but yeah, it's kind of cool seeing someone wanting to help people potentially who I say who are vulnerable, I would say in air quotes, because essentially that when you are in like stage lean condition, you are pretty vulnerable. That's kind of what it is, right? So it's kind of cool to see someone wanting to help someone in that situation, essentially. Um, so yeah, I guess the first question is kind of like why the change there. I think that's kind of a big one. Why kind of I think you potentially have been prepping clients to stage. I don't know if you still do that. So yeah, kind of like why was this kind of a why did you change direction?
I had a last client competing this year, and then I won't be taking on more clients for bodybuilding, like
Yeah.
competition specifically.
Yeah.
It doesn't align with what I want to be doing anymore. And there are plenty of great coaches out there that do a fantastic job anyway. So it's not like I'm going to be missing people. Um, the change came mostly from my own experience. I competed 2 years, 2 seasons, and in between, I did a prep for a photo shoot. So I was chronically dieting for 3 years. Very little time in a surplus in between. Very little recovery time, and it affected my mental health. It affected my hormonal health to a great extent. And I think it's something that we don't talk about enough.
Mhm.
There's a lot of glorification of, if you lose your period in a contest prep, it's seen as something that's normal, and we don't talk about it enough, and the potential negative consequences, because there will be consequences, and
Mhm.
losing your menstrual cycle or having dysregulations of your menstrual cycle. So I think, having been through that and having had the privilege of being very good at critical thinking and looking for help for myself,
Mhm.
I think it's just not what many people could potentially do, because if you are a gen pop person, or like even if you're into bodybuilding but you don't know the ins and outs of hormonal health or anything else like that, and many coaches don't even do themselves, so that's another issue itself. You're pretty vulnerable. You follow what your coach tells you to do, and it's like, oh, you lost your period. Well, that's expected to happen, but there's no support behind that, really, and that's tremendously wrong. And that's something we can actually discuss, and that's something we can do stuff about, which is the problem here. It's like, if you know that you can do something about it, like do something about it and tell your clients like, hey, this is going to probably happen because this is the reality of being in a low energy availability state for that amount of time. But here is our plan after the show to recover your period, or like, here are at least the consequences of not having your period. And then you can make an informed decision on, do I want to pursue prep, knowing all of the potential consequences that come after? And I would argue that for most females, it's not worth it. Get lean if you want to, but if you want to compete and you are developing disordered eating patterns or even eating disorders, and you're losing your menstrual cycle, or your menstrual cycle is heavily dysregulated, this is very problematic. And the work you're going to have to do afterward to get out of that place is really, really hard to do. And I mean, you can do it, but you need support, you need direction, you need guidance from professionals. And, it's even more complicated than that, because if you go to your GP to say, hey, I lost my period, the first thing they're going to be, it's like, oh, do you want birth control pill? And that will regulate everything. And it's like, no, it won't. So even from professional support that you think is going to be on your side, it's not even there. So we have, I think, as coaches, a responsibility, and it's not to treat people for mental health disorders or eating disorders or like hormonal dysregulation, but it's to let them know the consequences of living through these things so they can make an informed decision. And there are so many people out there coaching females who have zero idea about even the menstrual cycle, who don't know anything about anything, which is very problematic when you coach female through deficit. Just even that, it doesn't have to be a prep, but if you coach a female for a photo shoot and they want to get pretty lean, and it's something that's not going to be healthy for them, they need to know what could potentially happen. And I think that's not talked about enough, because people want to make money, and that's how they get more clients. And it's like, oh, look at this beautiful before and after. It's like, she went from like looking healthy to looking shredded, but you don't know what happened between the two pictures behind the scenes. And that's kind of the issue in the fitness industry.
You'll see me fucking nodding the whole way throughout that, because it's just like that you've unpacked a lot of shit. So I'm going to try and dissect a few things, and then we can go into topics. So number one, I think that as a male coach, it's fucking hugely important to know like female physiology like the back of your hand. But also number two, recognize that potentially you're not going to like know everything because you haven't gone through that phase, right? You haven't gone through everything in that situation, right? So there's that situation. But the amount of coaches that I know of who have willingly taken kind of females through preps who know absolutely jack shit about the menstrual cycle, or jack shit about anything, to be honest, is scary. So that's probably one thing that you obviously want to go through. The other thing is like the before and afters is like a big part of obviously coaching, but I feel like there's like the coaching care aspect, where even jumping on a Zoom call and saying, look, this is potentially what's going to happen if you go into a prep, losing your menstrual cycle, all this shit that's going to go on afterwards. Do you still want to do this? Yes, no, maybe. And at least then you've got like an informed decision of, yes, we want to do this. I suppose if you've got competitive aspirations and you want to be a WNBF pro and stuff like that, you're like, the kind of risk and reward, maybe in favor of reward if that's your overall goal. But as you say, I think for like 90% of the population, I would say maybe not worth it. But yeah, I've even like coached females to photo shoot stage, and it's kind of like the before and after isn't actually that amazing. However, that I'm proud to say that they haven't lost their menstrual cycle. So yeah, that's kind of like the the tail end. I think that going into the male coaches situation would be quite interesting.
Yeah, and you'll hear a lot of coaches say it's not our jobs to do that for people when
Yeah.
when they inquire for coaching. They should know what they're getting themselves into. And this is so wrong
Mm.
because you are caring for someone's health. First and foremost,
Mm.
the first rule, the first thing that they teach you when you take your PT certification, as shit as they are, it's do no harm. That's the
Yeah.
first freaking rule. It's do
Yeah.
no harm. The amount of people that I work with who've been through preps and who've been through diets and who developed disordered eating patterns to eating disorders. And sometimes I have to, turn them away and be like, I can't work with you because this is clinically, like, this is something you have to take care with an actual psychiatrist because I
Yeah.
cannot help you there. And people who have body image issues for years on end. And it's, when you're getting into the fitness industry or you are wanting to manipulate your appearance, you're going to, have some bad body image days. But our job is also to minimize that and make people understand that, you can have aesthetic, like, goals. That's okay. But your body is so much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just how it looks. Like, it performs so many things for you, and having your body being at peak health as much as you want, especially because we work with a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, which is really like your peak health. Like, this is when your body should be performing the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very problematic. But to come back to the male coaches, so we don't learn about the menstrual cycle. We don't learn much about hormonal health during our PT certifications. I did mine in Australia. I don't know how it is in the UK, but I imagine it's not great either. And anyone can really do it. So it's really about, if I want to care for my clients, and I know that prep is going to be taxing. I know that putting them through a deficit is going to be taxing. I'm going to take it upon myself to learn what
Mm-hmm.
I need to learn. And there are arguably shit resources out there, but there are really good ones too. There are people who talk about these things in an easy way to understand. And yes, you may have to invest your time and you may have to invest your money, but do you want to be a coach that care for people from, like, the inside out, or do you just want to make money and have amazing before and after pictures? And that is, the the former is a rarity in the fitness industry, and the latter, unfortunately, is, the majority of the fitness industry. So, if you're going to care for people, especially females, you have to learn at least a little bit about, what a menstrual cycle is, and how it can affect them, and the potential consequences of having dysregulations of your menstrual cycle. And yeah, that is, and I'm saying male coaches, but really it's coaches in general, because I I talk with a lot of female coaches. I've been in the fitness industry for years, and I can tell you for a fact that a lot of female coaches also don't know a lot about the
Mm.
menstrual cycle and hormones, and that's problematic too, obviously. So it's not a diss at male coaches in general, because, as females, we are probably a little bit more intuitive about it, but it's definitely a global issue more than just a male issue.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately a lot of my time is spent like, and I don't want to diss every single coach, but it's basically fixing other coaches' situations. So it's kind of like someone will come to me, and it's almost like you have to untangle the shit before you can even get started with your shit. And I think that that's kind of unfortunately where we're at with the fitness industry. You're spending a lot of time unwinding shit. Um, you might have a kind of like a client come to you and I always quite like it when someone comes to me and they say, have you had online coaching before? And they say no. I'm like, great, cool, fantastic. Well, we can start this afresh. Um, but yeah, it's quite astounding. And like you come back, or we'll go back to the PT qualification. It's quite astounding when I went through the PT qualification how little that sort of thing is covered. I don't think I want to say it wasn't even covered at all. Um, so yeah, that's pretty shit. And the amount of people that I see on social media talking about like taking the pill and stuff like that, like females shouldn't take the pill and stuff like that. It's like, fuck me, you can't say you can't take the pill. You're responsible for someone's like just for having a baby or something, you know? It's pretty mental, but that's unfortunately what happens when we have such an unregulated industry, right? Is that I could, or someone off the street could quite literally turn their Instagram bio to online coach and then coach
Yeah.
people, and that's unfortunately the situation that we're in.
Yeah, and I think it's our job now, because we know there's a problem in the fitness industry, and I mean we're not the only ones, obviously, but it's our job to kind of bridge the gap between the like shitty coaches, because I don't have a better term anyway,
Yeah,
to coaches who will care for you from the inside out and not just take your money. And I think it's even more prevalent now with all the business coaches out there. It's like, do you want to like scale your business to like, 6 figures a month at some point? It's like you cannot care for people in the best way possible if you are just trying to get as many clients as you can. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to make money, but in the fitness industry, it's such a shit show. It's like people will take on people, and they have no idea how to work with them on a healthful like aspect. It's more complicated than just like scaling your business. And yeah, I mean, it's money grabbing, it's frustrating.
yeah. Well, hopefully there's a potential new project. I say potential because it's a probable new project that hopefully covers a lot of the situation that you're talking about now. But yeah, we'll talk about that in a different podcast. But hopefully it's going to help as many people as possible, especially coaches. It's going to scratch up that kind of knowledge base and yeah, and then ultimately help as many people as possible. So back to your preps, do you think that that was the main causation of potential body image issues, or do you think it was something else down the line? Do you think that basically bodybuilding preps um are net pro or definitely like cons, net kind of negatives?
It was a net negative for me.
Yeah.
I I pretty much prepped back to back for 3 years. I
Mhm.
did one like show prep, then photo shoot prep, then show prep again,
Yeah.
from 2019 to 2021. And it was, I lost a lot of muscle mass through the process, because obviously, if you are in a deficit for that amount of time and you
Yeah.
don't have your period anymore, and there's a lot of dysregulations that just, your body has to take it from somewhere. And I was very, very lean. It's not a like getting lean problem. It's that I really got too lean. And it fucks up with your head for sure, because
Yeah.
when you're that lean for that long, when you have to recover from that and gain body fat back, it's a head fuck. it's
Yeah.
it's so hard. But on top of that, you have the body image aspect, and then you have the physiological aspect, where like my hormones were out of whack, like entirely. It was so complicated for me to get my period back, and to have like a normal cycle again. And I did not want to get hormonal assistance. So I did not want to take the pill. I wanted to do it naturally, so I can actually know for sure that my period was back. And I, the pill is a tricky subject in the fitness industry. If you want to take, it's great because it gives women autonomy and agency over their bodies. So that is fantastic. It's a great invention. It's more the like hiding the kind of underlying issues that is causing me problem with it. And I'm not saying don't take the pill. It's a discussion to have with your obstetrician or OBGYN or medical doctor, not an online coach, because they're not qualified to do so. But you know, it's not a bad thing per se. It's just for me in my situation, that was not the optimal thing to do. So yeah, overall it was a net negative because I look back and I wish I would have done things differently. And I think that's why I really want to spread the message to people so they don't lose 3 years of their life prepping or cutting and being in a deficit when they could be doing so many like more things oriented towards like growth. And I had a like I didn't have body image issues before I started prepping.
Mhm.
And I was looking back at my pictures pre first prep, I looked thick, like thick. Like I was peak mass. Like I'm 170 centimeters. I'm 5'7", and I was more than 70 kilos. So I was heavy, but
Mhm.
you know, looking back at the pictures, I'm like, I didn't have any body image issues, and I look much worse than I think like I did back then.
Mhm.
Um, so I know that my body image was great before, it was shit after. And you know, I really give it to prep. And you know, I made the decision to go through prep, so I'm not blaming anyone in that regard. It was my own decision, and I knew beforehand what I was getting myself into. It's just the chronic dieting that really fucked with you.
Yep.
So it was a net negative for me. I coached people through prep who found it to be a net positive. I coached people through prep who found it to be a net negative. We navigated that the best that we could. And sometimes, you know, people just realize it's not for them. I've
Mhm.
had people drop out of preps because they realized that it just wasn't worth it. And I will never blame them for doing so because they make an informed decision. I'll let them know that I will be supportive whatever happens, and I'll never tell them like, oh, you don't want it hard enough, because I think prep is much more complex than that. And if you go through prep, you have to have a very solid why you're doing it versus just like, I want to win, because winning's great, but bodybuilding is so out there nowadays. There are genetic freaks like evolving everywhere. And the, you know, if you're not a genetic freak, you probably won't place. And it's the reality of bodybuilding nowadays. And I'm only talking about natural bodybuilding just to make sure that people know, because I've prepped and competed in natural bodybuilding. I don't train enhanced people. I've never been enhanced. I don't know enough or anything about it to actually be productive in that regard. So yeah, it's did that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. I think I was just saying, like, I was just thinking in my head, I was like, fucking, like, you're talking about all this stuff, and then imagine in here that you chuck in like assistance, you chuck in like all the kind of like drugs you have to take and stuff like that. It's like that for me is the very reason why I don't coach any enhanced athletes. It's quite simply, it's like I think too much about all these different variables, and then on top of that, you chuck in all these fucking assisted drugs, and you kind of have to think about more shit. So yeah, that's definitely a reason why I would stay natural and only coach kind of natural individuals as well. In terms of the out route, so say for example, someone comes to you and they've just done a bodybuilding prep. How do you go about things? I know it's going to be individual, but let's just say, for example, of the sake of the podcast, how would you? What would be the first thing that you would do? Someone's come to you for coaching and they've been like, right, I've just had this prep, lost my menstrual cycle. Please fucking help me. So, say for example, someone is listening to this podcast and they've just gone through this exact thing. How can we help, basically?
Yeah, well, first, if they have lost their menstrual cycle, if their menstrual cycle is dysregulated, or they haven't even had a menstrual cycle for months or even weeks, that's the first thing to do.
Mm.
Not having your period when you are a female or having dysregulations of your menstrual cycle can have negative consequences quite quickly. And we're talking about things like bone density loss, and things that are sometimes irreversible long term. So, I mean, the menstrual cycle, like having a healthy, regulated menstrual cycle for female is kind of like reflective of your health, of your
Yeah.
general health. So if you know that your cycle is regular and you are having the same symptoms monthly, it's usually like a sign of good health.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing I would work on. And obviously, this is quite tricky because you are working with that aspect of we have to regain health, meaning that these people have to regain body fat and body weight. And this comes with body image issues. And then your mental health is really affected. So it's kind of a multifactorial situation. You have to care about many things at once. And usually, when people lose their period, I support uh hypothalamic amenorrhea recovery, but they work with a medical doctor in combination because I'm not officially allowed to like help them recover their period. So it's more of a support in like making sure you're not training too hard. You
Yep.
still want to be training somewhat, but you don't want to be training too hard. You want to drop back on any extra cardio that you're doing. You want to cut back on how many steps you're doing per day. Maybe stepping back from, being too anal about these things because this will affect your mental health as well.
Yep.
Um, and making sure you're gaining body fat back. And that's the tricky part with people who've gone through prep. It's like, oh, you're like, I'm lean right now and I really struggle to gain body fat back, but the only thing that's going to help me is actually gaining body fat back, and it's a real mind fuck.
Yep.
So it's really supporting them as best as you can mentally and physically. So, eating enough is going to be the priority. And that's why even when I went through prep and when I take people through prep, I don't do a reverse diet. I think for prep, it's dangerous
Yep.
afterward because you stay in a low energy availability state for sometimes months. And I think it puts people it makes people more prone to wanting to stay lean, and that is not what you want after prep anyway. So I do a recovery diet, 3DMJ style. So
Mm.
it's really pushing back to even above maintenance for the first few weeks and gaining back 5 to 10% of your body weight within the first 3 to 4 weeks, and then cruising from there, depending how you're feeling and depending how you're looking. But it's really more about how you're feeling versus how you're looking the first few months after prep, and making sure, some people will be able to gain very little body fat and be really healthy and fully function.
Yep.
Females in general, unless they have incredible genetics in that regard, won't be able to do that. We'll have to gain body fat back. And it's hard to sell because it will be body fat. You're not going to gain muscle back right after a show. It is not realistic. And people who sell you this are full of shit because this is not what's going to happen. And you need to gain body fat, not just muscle mass.
Yep.
Will you regain some muscle mass after the show? Sure. Will it be like, oh, we're getting into like a massing phase and it's going to be super structured and you're going to be like optimizing everything? Absolutely not. You need to gain body fat back. And then that takes me to the next step, which is really mental health work and making sure their goals after prep are aligned with health behaviors, making sure we are prioritizing health over, just how you look. And I do a lot of work on like body functionality appreciation, so what your body does for you versus how solely how it looks. Mindfulness helps a lot, self-compassion exercises help a lot. And it does sound very hippie yippie. The research, it's very evidence-based, and I am an evidence-based practitioner first and foremost, and I am very up to date, and I make sure I'm up to date with the current research. And mindfulness practices and self-compassion practices are great for supporting people with body image and disordered eating issues. if people have developed eating disorders, you have to refer them to a registered dietitian who can help them, or a psychiatrist, because then it's a clinical issue.
Yep.
And if you have, or you suspect that you have an eating disorder, do not go to an online coach. They will not be equipped for that. You need someone who is registered. You need someone who will have clinical support, and it's much more complicated than that. It's a mental health disorder. It's not just like something you can deal with because you look at yourself in the mirror and be like, oh, I look fat today. Like, this is much more complex than that. So yeah, HA recovery is a priority. Health in general, so gaining back body fat, mental health support as much as you can for body image issues, and then it's really limiting all the things that led you to being disordered in the first place. So, you know, maybe remove your watch if it's triggering because you think you have to do 13,000 steps every single day. Maybe remove tracking for a while and go on like, okay, I need to have 4 meals per day. And I really want to try to get back into, you know, listening to my body. And at first, you're going to think you're eating a lot of food, and you may have to gain more weight than you want to. But it's a good thing in the long run. And I will just talk about my experience to kind of describe that. I stopped tracking food after my last show. I went to Worlds in 2021 in Vegas, and then I stopped completely tracking my food because I was obsessed with everything, and that was not in a good way.
Yep.
There are good obsessions. This was not one of them. And I had to gain back a lot of weight before my body could actually settle into a lower body weight. So people are afraid of gaining weight after like a prep, after a show, after having gone through a deficit for a while. It's not that you're going to stay there forever. It's just a step that's required so you can actually get back to being healthy. And once you're in a better position, your hormones will kind of help regulate your body image, kind of help regulate your hunger and your fullness cues. And that will allow you to go back down to a healthy body weight. And the only thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up for a minute, is that the body weight at which you're thriving healthfully is probably, or the body composition rather, is probably going to be fatter and heavier than you want it to be, and that's okay. And that is for most people. Like, the amount of females that can stay lean year round without being enhanced, it's very low. The number is very low, and it's only due to genetic factors. That is the only reason they can maintain like a 6-pack year round and still have a period and still be healthy. For most of us, it's just not realistic. And I think that touches on like another problem in the fitness industry, which is unrealistic expectations because of, you know, people in the fitness industry staying lean year round when you don't know, you know, what goes on behind the scenes. They're probably not healthy. They're probably enhanced. They probably use Photoshop. So it's just not realistic.
Yeah, I think the latter point can be males as well, right? I mean, you've seen it all the
Oh
time
yeah.
where people are like the fake natty crew, right? I think it's actually kind of turned its head a little bit where people are talking of like a bit transparent about it, but then it could also turn into influencing at the same time. That's a whole
Yep.
different ball game where people are
Yep.
like laying out their whole drug usage. It's like, yeah, but you're talking to like 18-year-olds here and you're telling them what you take. And it's like, that's not
Yeah.
educating, that's influencing. So they're going to go out and be like, you know, but I quite like the way that you've kind of gone through all of that situation because I it pains me to see when male coaches say that like the difference between like programming for males and females, or like basically females are small males. It's like, yeah, no, you've got this absolutely fucked up. Because for a male,
Yeah.
post prep is relatively simple. The kind of like revert or rebound out, right? Which is kind of why I like shows and then going, like, say for example you're at Worlds at Las Vegas. It's like that's quite a good rebound to go into. You're pretty much in Las Vegas, so you might as well have food and stuff like that. But for females, it is a lot harder. And again, that's what I mean about having like a consult call beforehand, because it's not just the prep, it's the prep and then it's like the out route of the prep. So when you're looking at competing for a female, you're realistically talking about like 1.5, maybe 2 years of your life, maybe just for one show if you want to do it properly. That's where I think it, because you got like the 20-30 week prep, and then you've probably got the 20-30 week getting back to fucking normal life. But yeah, cool. I think we'll probably leave it there. I think that's a pretty mind-blowing episode. If you want to cover anything else, or are you good?
No, I'll just finish on this note, is that for many females, competing will not be kind of what people make you think it's going to be like. And if you really weigh the pros and cons, it's if you don't want to make a living out of it, and if it's not something that is, the fire is burning so like bright inside you for prep that you have to go through it, probably don't do it. That I will just let it there.
Yeah, I think that obviously the when you look at the glitz and the glamour of prep, and I think it's more so for females than males, because obviously like the male side of things, you don't have like the makeup, the hair, the suits and stuff like that. It's very much like you just get on stage, you tan like a what's it, and then you go home. But I think for females, it's very much like, yeah, there's a lot of like, I say dangers in air quotes. It's not even in air quotes. There is a lot of dangers towards prep.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think having a podcast where you are outlining the dangers of prep is quite important, I think. So hopefully that's done that. So if you're thinking of competing this year, my online coaching link is in the bio. But
Appropriate thing to do.
yeah, yeah, plug it. Okay, Jess, where can everyone find you so they can learn some shit?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Jess Dalglish Coaching, and that is pretty much the only like platform I am on that has relevant information. And I obviously offer online coaching and consultation, even for coaches who want to learn more about coaching females, for example, or body image and disordered eating and hormones. But yeah, that is just Instagram.